My friends, today I prepared a full guitar music theory course for you. These 4 topics will take you from the fundamentals of guitar theory to really interesting and more advanced topics without getting too confusing or impractical, of course, because these are the main ingredients that will truly make you stand out as a guitar player. And if you follow this blueprint from today's course, you will finally know exactly what you're doing whenever you're looking at the guitar neck. Your guitar solos, songs, riffs and improvised takes will sound much better right away because you're not always playing the same old boring stuff. You will have finally unlocked the full fretboard and you will finally sound like a pro once you followed all these steps. Before we get started, I want you to know that this is just a super small preview of what awaits you in my actual online guitar academy on patreon.com/Bernd. Students over there have access to 12 premium guitar technique courses, 5 much more detailed music theory courses from beginner to intermediate to advanced, and even 4 home recording courses that will show you how to dial in a professional tone at home. There's also a limited personal coaching tier. As the name suggests, with this one you get personal coaching directly from me in the secret VIP Facebook group. Since the demand got so incredibly big over the last couple of years, we can sadly only accept a limited amount of students every month. So click the link in the description or in the first comment down below to see if there's still a slot available for you. I'm waiting for you in my online guitar academy on Patreon. Can't wait to meet you. Until then, have fun with today's course. Our first very important topic, bad habits theory-wise when it comes to your guitar solos. So today's first topic is all about phrasing, a topic that you guys and girls actually voted for on Patreon. Great choice. It's a term that gets thrown around quite a lot, so here's the textbook definition for you. Musical phrasing is the way a musician shapes a sequence of notes in a passage of music to allow expression. So this is all about creativity and coming up with interesting ways of phrasing your ideas as you're playing. Here's a bad example for you right away. Let's be honest, we do tend to often play scales up and down like this, when we could actually say something much more creative or meaningful with our playing. So I want to show you a really cool exercise and system that will transform your current, maybe a bit basic lick library into an extensive archive of limitless possibilities. Let's work with this ascending line in A harmonic minor. Sounds pretty boring, just a short ascending scale phrase, but what happens when we keep this simple framework in place and simply start from a different note? This is exactly the first really easy phrasing trick that you can use whenever you're not completely satisfied with your licks. Listen to how cool these variations sound when I simply start on a different note each time. The reason why this is so exciting is because you can apply this system to anything that you already learned. Just take your personal absolute favorite lick after watching this lesson until the end and try it with a different starting point. I'm pretty sure that you will be amazed with all the creative phrasing ideas that suddenly come to mind when you experiment with this. Of course, the best and easiest way of getting started with all this is downloading your tabs, guitar profiles, backing tracks and video play-alongs I made especially for you on patreon.com/Bernd. So click the link in the description or in the first comment to get all your practice files if you're serious about playing amazing guitar solos as fast as possible and kind of sick of playing the same old boring licks over and over again. Today's workouts really help with that. Another guilty pleasure of us shredders is playing never-ending lines of 16th notes or 16th note triplets. Yes, that's a lot of fun, but it can get quite repetitive and predictable for your listeners. So the magic ingredient that makes your solos much more interesting and creative right away is actually the easiest thing you could possibly do on the guitar. You don't play at all. That's right, adding rest to your guitar solos and to your improvised takes allows them to breathe. But since I actually mentioned this for the first time a while ago, a lot of my students on Patreon sent me messages like, how do I actually know when to play and when not to play? So the one habit that you definitely need to develop to succeed with phrasing is actually hearing and also singing what you're playing inside your head. You don't even have to sing out loud, you can just imagine it. I also won't sing my phrases in this video to spare your ears. But if you manage to sing along in your head, imagining the lines that you're playing as a singer, you will suddenly place your rests much more organically because you simply won't play when you would actually take a breath. That's the big secret and revelation right here, and the main reason why these breaks are so effective. It simply reminds us of the natural flow of the voice and of literally stopping and taking a breath after singing a very long phrase. So for this second exercise, I made a drone backing track for you on Patreon that allows you to ignore timing, rhythm and all of those factors for a while. I really just want you to focus on hearing and following your melodies as a singer in your mind, and on placing these short rests organically when you would actually take a breath. As I said, you can also sing out loud, that would be even better, but even just thinking about your playing that way does wonders for your phrasing. And when a producer or bandmate says to you, play something more melodic, it's often not even about the note choices or the scales that you're using, it's about this exact feeling of organic flow as you're playing and improvising. So since we are already deep into phrasing, let's talk a bit about string bending and vibrato. Let's be honest, these topics are quite often overlooked, especially in rock and metal. And that's a real shame, because you can shape your voice and style as a guitarist with those really expressive techniques. And by the way, nothing sounds worse on the guitar than bending to the wrong pitch. So aside from bad intonation, one very big mistake is relying on just one variation of string bending, like the whole tone bend. And completely ignoring all the other exciting possibilities, like the unison bend, the pre-bend, microtonal bends, or bends on top of bends. And there are even more exciting things you can do with string bending. So as an exercise and demonstration, here's a really cool lick that features different bending techniques. So that sounds quite interesting for a basic melody like that. I started out with a bend release approach. Then I was playing a pre-bend, so I was bending up the note before I actually played it to the right pitch. Then I played the note and then I released it. I was also using the classic whole tone and half tone bends, a classic unison bend as well. And at the end, my personal favorite, a bend on top of a bend. So with some added vibrato on top, this allows me to get a lot of expression out of my playing. And I highly suggest practicing this, because my guess is that you currently don't have string bending and vibrato in your practice routine. Make sure to leave a comment down below to tell me if I'm right about this. Another thing I highly suggest is joining our 30% elite. That's right, after all this time, still around 70% of you guys and girls are still not subscribed to this channel. That means you sadly keep missing a lot of helpful and hopefully entertaining videos every single week. And the worst part, you are actually not a real part of our guitar community here on YouTube yet. You might have actually missed the video that would have solved your personal biggest guitar frustration, and that won't happen anymore if you're finally subscribed to this channel. The next very common lead guitar mistake is about playing lines that go nowhere. Maybe you're familiar with this expression. One of our biggest goals as lead guitar players should be creating memorable licks and moments for the listener, and those melodies or repeated concepts are often called motifs. To show you that this way of thinking doesn't exclusively apply to blues and jazz, I prepared a really cool rock metal example that is based on the harmonic minor sound. So right here I was working with a rhythmic motif, and I think that becomes pretty clear as soon as you look at the transcription. I had a cool and simple phrasing idea in the first measure that I started building on in the following measures, until I found an awesome conclusion for the entire phrase at the ending of the lick. This kind of structure is very satisfying to listen to, because you feel like there's a build-up and a resolution at the end. And even if you're playing fast, technical and crazy guitar solos, those small rhythmic motifs or melodies have a greater chance of getting stuck in your listener's head than those never-ending scale runs that just go nowhere. The next mistake concerns your timing and rhythm skills. As you might know, one of the most common bad lead guitar stereotypes is that we don't have a good sense of rhythm. And there's actually some truth to that, because even if we are playing perfectly in time, we often rely on just using one note value exclusively for our long line of notes, like playing a really long scale run only using 8th notes or 16th notes or 16th note triplets. And as we discussed, this can get boring after a while. But aside from just adding rests in there, like we previously discussed, you can also really spice up your licks by often switching between different note values. This effect is really awesome. Allow me to show you a quick example. So with this example lick, I was switching between 16th notes, 8th note triplets and 16th note triplets in different ways. And although I was playing a relatively long line with predictable scale phrases, it still sounded pretty interesting and you couldn't really predict where it's going next rhythmically. So switching between different note values is not only an awesome rhythm exercise that we often work on, it's an amazing and actually quite easy phrasing trick that you should definitely use from now on. And the last mistake is all about your use of scales. I know it might look really tedious and overwhelming to study all of those different scales, but you might sound a bit basic and limited as a player if you're only working with the basics over your entire career. Aside from the very popular pentatonic scale, most players are drawn to the natural major and minor scales, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with using them. But if you also know some more exciting and exotic variations, your guitar solos will greatly benefit from your theory knowledge. I will play some lines for you now over our drone backing track. I will switch between different minor scale variations and you will hear how cool this sounds. So whenever you encounter basic power chord riffs in rock and metal, or just rhythm patterns based on the lowest available string, chances are you have a lot of harmonic freedom to experiment with all kinds of different sounds and scales. Of course, you don't always have to use every single scale that you know in one single solo. But please trust me on this, it really pays off to switch between exotic and suspenseful sounds and more basic sounds to create an exciting and really unique listening experience. Alright, for the next chapter I would like to show you 6 absolutely life-changing guitar music theory hacks. Remember that you can download all your practice files for this video by joining on patreon.com/burned today. That's my online guitar academy and the link is down below. As mentioned at the start, you get access to 12 premium guitar technique courses, 5 music theory courses and 4 home recording courses, and there's even a personal coaching tier in case you want my personal input. So if you're still not part of this, just click the link below, join today, I'm waiting for you inside. So when you learn a new scale or practice scales in general, you're always drawn to playing it as fast as possible, up and down. Please allow me to offer a more interesting and musical approach with exercise number 1. Now, instead of working with thirds or fourths, we will work with sixths. A word that really challenges my Austrian accent. These bigger interval jumps sound so amazing and I love to work with them in my music right now. This already sounds so much better than just playing the scale up or down, although you're still working with a pattern/exercise right here. Okay, honestly, how cool is that? I bet you heard something like this already and got frustrated when you tried to replicate this awesome neoclassical complex sound. Playing and writing scale patterns like that sounds so harmonically complex and virtuosic. So with this exercise you are playing A, F, B, G sharp, C, A, D, B, and so on. So you're skipping 4 notes in the scale now and get these beautiful big interval jumps. So let's say I want to play an E minor 7th arpeggio, a very common one. I need the root E, the minor 3rd G, the perfect 5th B, and the minor 7th D. But usually we don't really think about those notes and just look up a box or shape and play it up and down as fast as possible. But here's how it looks like in contrast to that when I'm playing those 4 notes of the E minor 7th arpeggio with a 2-note per string approach. So I'm playing E, the root on the 7th fret on the A string, G, the minor 3rd on the 10th fret on the A string, B, the perfect 5th on the 9th fret on the D string, and D, the minor 7th on the 12th fret on the D string. Pretty easy, right? And the next exciting trick is that you can just copy and paste this exact shape into the next octave so you get a bigger arpeggio. And you have a pretty big and cool sounding E minor 7th arpeggio without looking up any scale boxes or shapes on the internet. So the next pretty mind-blowing thing I want you to understand is that you don't have to change much of this at all to get different arpeggio shapes. So in simple words, you just move up one fret with your pinky finger to get the E major shape. So really slow. So minor 7th, major 7th. How does this simple system actually hold up when you have to compose an arpeggio section over complicated chords? So let's check out the first contender, the caged system. This is all about taking your common C, A, G, E and D chord shapes as a reference to connect pentatonic scales, heptatonic scales or arpeggios across the neck. I will break this down fast, effective and with no added nonsense in this video for you. I really want you to understand the basic mechanics, advantages and disadvantages of caged so that you can decide if this is worth digging into. So the C major chord consists of the notes C, E and G, root, major third and perfect fifth. So when we map this out in this area of the fretboard, it looks like that. In there you can find the common C major bonfire chord shape we all know. As you can see, we have even more C's, E's and G's in there. You will need those extra notes a bit later to build your arpeggios and scales, but please don't worry about that right now. Now let's find our C's, E's and G's in the next location of the fretboard. As you can see, this results in the A shape, the shape you would usually identify as an A major chord. If you would place a capo on the 3rd fret, you'd have the same fingering as with the A major chord, just moved up higher on the neck. Now let's move this up again. Our C's, E's and G's in the next section of the fretboard result in the G shape. Once again, if I would put a capo on the 5th fret, it would be the exact same fingering, so it's essentially a G major chord shape moved up a bit. Now to the next section of the fretboard. In this section, our C's, E's and G's form the E shape. Once again, if we had a capo on the 8th fret, it would also be the exact same fingering as that E major chord, just moved up a bit. And let's do that one last time. When we look at our C's, E's and G's even higher on the neck, we get the D shape. So if you had a capo on the 10th fret, it would be the exact same fingering again as with the D major chord. Once again, just moved up the fretboard. So we are playing a C major chord with every shape, since we are playing the notes C, E and G. But we have a C shape, an A shape, a G shape, an E shape and a D shape. And that's where the name caged comes from. But what are the actual advantages and disadvantages when it comes to working with this system? Advantage number 1, it will be easy and fun for you to accent chords when you're improvising if you memorize the arpeggio shapes for all of those caged shapes we discussed. So if you know the C shape, A shape, G shape, E shape and D shape of the C major arpeggio, you have a lot of possibilities to choose from. The second advantage, you will remember and connect shapes much easier all across the neck in all kinds of different keys, because you will start to automatically think of the surrounding shapes. Remember that they are always aligned the same way, just with different starting points for each key. So if you're playing the G shape, you know that you always have the A and E shapes surrounding it. Advantage number 3, you will probably understand the music theory and connection between scales, chords and arpeggios much better than just studying music theory with a book. Practicing and improvising with the caged system is a great music theory workout for your practice routine, and your fretboard visualization will also greatly benefit from that. And advantage number 4, you will sound a bit more musical right away when you're improvising. That's because you start to think about the actual notes and not just about scale shapes, like adding 2 notes to the basic arpeggios to get the pentatonic shape, or adding 2 more notes to get the heptatonic shape. But what are the disadvantages when it comes to that? So disadvantage number 1, the usual caged shapes mix 3 note per string with 2 note per string fingerings as soon as you move to the heptatonic scales like natural major and minor. That will obviously be a bit harder to speed up when you're all about shredding. Disadvantage number 2, the resulting caged arpeggio shapes can also be a bit weird sometimes, so maybe not the optimal choice for difficult sweep picking sections. And disadvantage number 3, you obviously only have 5 patterns with caged, the C, A, G, E and D shapes. Most other scales and modes contain 7 7 patterns for all 7 notes. So this might be an issue with fully understanding the modes or exotic scales in general. But with all that said, I still highly recommend studying the caged system. In my opinion, this is something that every single guitar player should know about. So to assist you with fully understanding and learning it, I put together an exercise routine that will help you with memorizing it in just a couple of days, and this will truly transform your playing forever. What I'm trying to say here is that you can turn all your favorite chords into amazing sounding arpeggios. And that's exactly what I want to show you today. So the A minor chord consists of the notes A, C and E. But what if we take the much more exciting sound of the A minor 11 chord and turn this one into an arpeggio? That is a really cool sound, especially compared to a whole different world. And what if we even add the 9th on top, for example? Now that is a beautiful sounding chord, right? So I'm adding 3 extra notes right here. G, the minor 7th, B, the 9th, because I really love this sound, and D, the 11th. Let's turn this into a really cool arpeggio shape. Check out how sophisticated this already sounds. Here you create symmetrical 3-note per string shapes for heptatonic scales and end up with 7 shapes all across the neck. These shapes are absolutely perfect for shredding, since the symmetry will allow you to blaze through every single position easily. Theory-wise, this is also a more complete approach, since you end up with all 7 positions for all 7 notes of the scale. And one super nerdy information that hopefully isn't too overwhelming right now: these 7 positions are also simultaneously the modes of each scale you're working on. So if you study the 3-note per string positions of the C major scale across the neck like this, the second shape you see with D as the starting note has actually the same notes as D Dorian. The next shape with E as the starting point has the same notes as E Phrygian. The next shape with F as the starting point has the same notes as F Lydian. And that also goes for the next shapes G Mixolydian, A Aeolian and B Locrian. So all modes of the C major scale. I know this part was a bit fast, but I just quickly wanted to say, if learning the modes is currently on your practice list, this system might be the best way to go for it. Advantage number 1, almost all the shredders unsurprisingly work with 3-note per string scales, since they are more symmetrical and it's easier to come up with fast patterns. So if you're into the fast and crazy stuff, those are definitely the scale shapes to go for. Advantage number 2, like you already know, the arpeggios you can find in these shapes are also more suited for sweep picking. Those are the classic shapes you know from all those rock and metal sweep picking etudes. And advantage number 3, you will probably have the best tool to learn about the modes and their connection, since you end up with all 7 possible shapes for all 7 scale notes. As I mentioned earlier, you only have 5 shapes with the caged system. But what about the disadvantages when it comes to the 3-note per string system? Well, unsurprisingly, the theory behind all of this is almost always ignored. Most players, and especially shredders, don't want to learn the music theory background and just memorize the shapes and play them up and down as fast as possible. This doesn't really result in very creative solos. Disadvantage number 2. If you don't deliberately study this yourself, you won't see the connection between chords, scales and arpeggios that easy with the 3-note per string system. And you also might not understand how different scales are related to each other. A lot of rock and metal players I know think that learning scales is an endless routine and grind of memorizing all kinds of complicated shapes, but you often only have to change one note to get from one scale to the next, and all of this is probably a bit easier to understand with the caged method. And disadvantage number 3, sometimes players work with 3-note per string shapes that have note repetitions in them. Of course, this can sound really unique and cool, but if you don't know what you're doing, it might sound a bit awkward. I would recommend avoiding it at the beginning and working with shapes like the one you see on screen. It's not as symmetrical, but you don't play any notes twice in a row. So first things first, when I say the words A minor pentatonic scale, you will probably think of that. That, of course, is the classic 2-note per string approach we are all familiar with, and it serves as the perfect scale to start experimenting with guitar solos and improvisation. But for me personally, it was always kind of difficult to come up with interesting and exciting ideas in this 2-note per string context. So I abandoned the classic pentatonic scale relatively early and moved to the modes or other exciting and exotic 3-note per string scales. This was a mistake because you can get some amazingly creative ideas out of this scale, and I love to work with it nowadays. That big and important realization came to me after I started extending the classic 2-note per string pentatonic approach to get a 3-note per string pattern. This is basically how I started out with that approach. Here you can see that I kept the exact same 2-note per string A minor pentatonic scale pattern, but I added one more note on each string. That immediately sounds and feels completely different, although I'm playing the exact same notes. But when you work with that shape without paying attention to the repeating notes, you might sound a bit strange, like you're playing notes twice without actually wanting that. The solution to this problem is moving the scale up with every single string transition to keep the notes in the correct order: A, C, D, E, and G. Alright, for the next chapter I would like to show you my absolute favorite guitar scale trick. I think it might change the way you're visualizing and thinking of scales forever. It's one of my absolute favorite tricks when it comes to theory. In case you feel like you have to work on the fundamentals just a little bit more to understand everything I'm telling you in this course, remember that there are full premium beginner music theory courses on patreon.com/Bernd. That's my online guitar academy. These will take you from the absolute basics and fundamentals to more advanced and interesting topics like this. So if you're still not part of my online guitar academy, just click the link down below, join today, and I will see you inside. So I'm quite sure you're familiar with 3-note per string scales by now, so just playing 3 notes on each string to get the classic heptatonic scales, like the natural major or minor scale. And from one of the more recent picking workouts, you might also be familiar with 4-note per string scales, so the same system, but you're playing 4 notes on each string. So both of these systems are really cool for playing fast shred licks, but the disadvantage with both of them is that we still tend to think in boxes quite a lot, so in scale patterns that we just learn and memorize. For example, this common position for the C major or A minor scale. So that's kind of cool when you start working in some patterns like this, but it still almost just sounds like you're playing it up and down, right? So I recently thought it would be pretty cool actually to combine that 3-note per string and 4-note per string approach, but not just to create even more scale boxes that you have to learn and memorize. I'm also combining that with what I told you about intervallic functions and visualizing scales in numbers or intervals, so to say. So to refresh your memory, what this is actually all about is visualizing scales not by just seeing the dots on the fretboard you memorized from scale diagrams and not even thinking about the notes or intervals that you're playing. Thinking in those intervallic functions is all about seeing the actual intervals that you're playing and the intervals that make up the scale. So for example, when I'm playing the A minor pentatonic scale, I'm not just thinking about this common scale box. I'm also not thinking about the notes that I'm playing. So A, C, D, E, G, A, C, D, E, G, A, C, and so on. I'm thinking about the scale formula, so the intervals that make up the scale. So 2 for major second, 3 for major third, flat 3 for minor third, for example, and so on. So with the pentatonic scale, I have 1, flat 3, the minor third, 4, the perfect fourth, 5, the perfect fifth, flat 7, the minor 7, and that's it actually, just 5 notes as you know. Then this scale formula would repeat over and over again. So once again in the next octave, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, 1, flat 3, and so on. And the reason why this is so great for improvisation and for just playing freely all across the neck is that you can apply this scale formula to any root note that you can find, so to every single A that you can find across the neck. For example, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7. So you automatically start to think more horizontally with your licks and you don't feel trapped in a box as much. But the biggest advantage to this is that you can alter this scale formula to your liking. So the more scale formulas you actually memorize, the easier it will be to switch between different scales. The scale formula for the natural minor scale, for example, is 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. So you only have 2 additional notes when you compare it to the minor pentatonic scale. And by knowing that and working with scale formulas across the neck, it's super easy for me to switch between pentatonic and heptatonic ideas and lines. Because I simply know which intervals to add to get the heptatonic scale of my liking. I could also add notes from the modes, for example, like the major sixth of the Dorian mode. So if you cannot visualize your fretboard like this yet, I recommend starting by learning the scale formula of the minor and major pentatonic scales and then the modes. After that you can go into harmonic minor, melodic minor and Phrygian dominant, for example. And that's honestly pretty much it concerning the scales you're using very frequently. And as soon as you start to internalize the scale formulas and intervals for all of these scales, you will see that a lot of them are almost identical and you only have to change one note. So it's really easy to learn and memorize this. It will only take you a week, I think. So please, I beg you to spend some time on this. It's pretty much the most effective method of quickly visualizing the entire fretboard and improvising and switching between different scales. Now here's how I use that for my shred licks by combining 3-note per string and 4-note per string scales. Now let's say I want to write a fast and really awesome shred lick in the B minor scale. I know that my scale formula is 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. So that's essentially everything I have to memorize concerning this scale. But instead of playing the scale just like I did it, playing 3 notes on the E string, 3 notes on the A string and just 1 note on the D string, that's not really effective. I'm playing all notes of the B minor scale on just 2 strings by playing 3 notes on the lower string and 4 notes on the higher one. So 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. And the reason why this is so cool is not just because you have a lot of phrasing options by having 3 notes on one string and 4 on the next. If you're actively visualizing and thinking those intervals in the scale and the scale formula, you can simply copy and paste it to every single root note that you can find. So when I'm looking for the B's in this area, I can just work with the octave interval. So I have B, my root note right here. This is the octave interval, so I have B here once again, then once again that's the octave interval. So I have B here once again. And this is where the magic happens. Let's apply this scale formula, so the 3-note per string pattern and the 4-note per string pattern, to all of those root notes on all different strings. So without even thinking about a scale diagram or some kind of scale box, I was playing a huge scale pattern across all strings with a really interesting fingering, starting on the 7th fret on the low E string and ending right here on the 19th fret on the high E string. So covering a pretty huge area across the fretboard and not just one box that you're playing up and down. And this is also much easier to memorize and to play than it looks, because you're really just copying and pasting the same scale formula across different octaves. So that's just a small and quick example of the fun that you can actually have with this. You can even extend these shapes some more with tapping if you want to, by playing 5 notes on the next string, for example. And remember that you can quickly work with any scale imaginable by just learning the scale formula, most of the time just 7 intervals. So let's assume that you never worked with the Phrygian dominant scale, for example. You just take a quick look at the scale formula to memorize it. So 1, flat 2, that's the characteristic Phrygian note. 3, the major third. 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, and that's all you need to memorize in order to play some really cool shred licks with that one. Because once again, let's see what happens when we copy and paste this scale formula to different octaves. Next position. Next position. So I hope that you can see right away how powerful this system can be for writing some really cool licks more in a horizontal kind of way across the neck. It's great when it comes to technique and phrasing because you have a 3-note per string and a 4-note per string pattern. And it's great from a music theory standpoint because you learn to visualize the scales with the intervallic functions, and you can just quickly swap notes and intervals to get different sounds and scales without feeling trapped in those nasty scale boxes and scale diagrams. So I would absolutely love to put together a practical follow-up lesson with some actual licks that you can learn, or maybe even a small small composition to internalize. But for now, I really want you to experiment with this system across multiple scales so that you get comfortable with the stretching. Once again, it's really helpful to place your thumb behind your middle finger in order to make those stretches. And in order to help you with that, I prepared a really cool guitar profile and also a workbook. This will show you my personal favorite fingerings for these scales so far. So you will learn how to play the most common scales with this exciting new system. You always just have to learn the scale formula, so most of the time just 7 notes. And then to start out, you're simply moving this pattern around by finding the next root note and just copying and pasting it. Alright, and for the last chapter of this course, I would like to talk about some more advanced theory topics. If all this is a little bit too basic for you and you want to dive into the more crazy advanced stuff, I also have some really cool premium advanced music theory courses on patreon.com/burn. So if you want to dive deeper and unlock the true secrets of guitar music theory, just click the link down below, patreon.com/burn. Join today. I will show you everything inside my online guitar academy. So this concept and theory trick actually is really helpful for you in case you find yourself writing the same kind of riffs and chord progressions all the time. Because as the name suggests, you're simply borrowing different chords for your chord progression to make it much more interesting. I'm sure you know the feeling of coming up with a huge chorus riff, but one of those chords isn't really working and you're hearing something different in your head. And then you have to sit down and try hundreds or thousands of alternatives and you simply can't get there. Learning how systems like the modal interchange and chord substitution actually work will finally save you from the annoying guesswork, because you can just use a formula, your brain, and some advanced theory knowledge. So first of all, you should know about the concepts of parallel and relative tonality. An example of parallel tonality would be A major and A natural minor, for example. And an example of relative tonality would be something like C major and A natural minor, for example. If you already worked on the beginner music theory course on Patreon, you know exactly what the difference is right here. The relative keys right here, in our example, C major and A minor, simply share the exact same notes. As you know, the notes of C major are C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And the notes of A minor are A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So the exact same notes, just in a different order or from a different starting point. So if we just assume that all music is either in major or minor, it gives us multiple different possibilities for the modal interchange. Number 1, major to minor. Number 2, major to major. Number 3, minor to major. And number 4, of course, minor to minor. Let's start with the most common way, major to minor. So the most common way of working with a modal interchange is simply spicing up a simple progression in major by borrowing some chords from some kind of relative minor. So as a common example, here's a 1, 6, 4, 5 cadence in the key of G major. So G major 7, E minor 7, C major 7, D7. As you can see down below, all of these chords are in the key of G major, so nothing too exciting, but also nothing wrong about this. But check out what happens when we perform a modal interchange for the third chord. That sounds much more spicy right away. So here I was replacing the C major 7th chord with a C minor 7th chord. This one chord does not change the overall key of the chord progression, but it definitely adds something really interesting, right? So the question is, where did that chord come from? What's happening here? And how can you actually improvise over it? As you see, we have 2 notes right here that are not part of G major. And this usually reveals that this modal interchange chord must have been borrowed from some kind of parallel G scale. As you hopefully know from my lessons about the modes, all of the modes are closely connected and often there's just one note that's changing when you move from one mode to the next. That means you often also get multiple choices, like in our case the parallel Phrygian, Aeolian or Locrian scale or mode. They all have a minor 7th chord on the 4th scale degree. The next question you probably have right now is, okay, but which scale do you actually choose when you're improvising over this? It's mostly a creative choice and you can go for what sounds right for your ears, but a good rule for that is that you usually go for the scale that has the most notes in common with the original scale or tonality. So in this case, the first choice would be probably natural minor, because it has the most amount of notes in common with our original scale, G natural major. But I personally recommend, instead of always going for the easiest or most obvious solution, just give it a try and see what sounds best. So that's the most commonly used modal interchange, but instead of always just borrowing chords from a relative minor mode, as the name suggests, you can also borrow from any mode. So if you're in the beginner-friendly key of C major, you could also use a G major 7th chord on the 5th scale degree instead of the G dominant 7th chord. That way, for example, you would be borrowing the 5th chord of the Lydian mode. So my suggested way of practicing this after watching today's video, please make sure to check out the cheat sheet I made for you concerning modal interchanges with the Google Drive link or the Dropbox link in the post down below. I think this one will help you a lot the next time you're writing a chord progression and it doesn't really sound that satisfying to your ears. I summarized all the most common options for you that you can cycle through, and the great thing with the system is that you're not just simply changing a random chord in there. You obviously also know which scale to use to shred over that when you're improvising over the chord changes. So this is an awesome trick for making your compositions sound more sophisticated, and I think it's definitely not as hard as it sounds at first, especially if you have a good knowledge of the modes already. If you don't know anything about the modes yet, I also linked the lesson in this post, so you might want to start with this one before you tackle all the sheets I made for you and the homework that you will find in the folder. I will hopefully see some of that homework in the Patreon VIP Facebook group in the form of videos or also audio files. As always, I will give you some helpful feedback over there in case you have any further questions about that. Up next, I want to show you the easiest and most popular possibilities when it comes to chord substitution in general. In case you're just getting started with this and you want to spice up your chord progressions right away, I also have some easier tricks for you. First of all, you can always replace a major or minor chord with a sus2 or sus4 chord, so suspended chords. So that's one of my favorites, the sus2 chord. Really cool and relatively simple chord that doesn't really sound like major or minor. This is an example for a sus4 chord. Also sounds pretty cool. And what the term suspended chord actually means is that you're removing the third and you're replacing it with the second in case of the sus4 chord, or the fourth in case of the sus4 chord. So a sus2 chord or a sus4 chord, those are not minor or major chords, they have a more neutral sound, so to say, and that's an easy and very common way to substitute both major or minor chords. The second common and quite easy method of chord substitution, so to say, is simply adding tensions to your chords to make them more interesting. So you're not fully changing the chord and taking or borrowing a different chord, you're simply adding some extensions to it to make it sound more interesting. And as you might know, my favorite example of that is adding the ninth on top. So this is the simple C major chord. And here's how it sounds like when you add the 9th D on top. Much cooler. It sounds similar to the sus2 chord, but the difference right here is that I still have the major third in here. So it's still a major chord. I'm not replacing E with D, I'm simply adding it to the voicing, hence the name C add 9. The next one is more interesting already because we're finally really substituting chords. In major, for example, you can experiment with switching the tonic chord with the chord on the third scale degree, a minor chord. So instead of playing C major in a chord progression in C major, you could play E minor. So let's say a 2-5-1 cadence. Now I'm replacing the last chord C major with E minor, the chord on the third scale degree. It also sounds pretty cool. The reason why this works is because the C major 7th chord consists of the notes C, E, G and B. So if you're not playing the root note here, you're playing E, G and B. So often with chord substitution, you're simply cutting off certain parts of the chord and you're finding a quick and efficient way to substitute them by doing that. Of course, you can also use your knowledge about the relative keys we discussed a bit earlier. As you know, C natural major and A natural minor share the same notes. So why not also replace a C major chord with an A minor chord? So instead of playing C major, you can often just play A minor instead. There are many more possibilities, but I don't want to overwhelm you today. I just want to show you my personal favorite in the end. What I really love doing, especially with arpeggios and with my sweep picking sections, is replacing the dominant 7th chord, so the 5 chord, with a diminished 7th chord on the 7th scale degree. So to most rock and metal players, a sound like this immediately sounds like blues and not really that attractive when it comes to riffs or fast sweep picking sections. But a sound like this instead immediately sounds more menacing, more like metal or rock. And what I simply did here, instead of playing the G dominant 7th chord, I was playing a B diminished 7th chord. The reason why this works is because the B diminished 7th chord essentially has almost the exact same notes as the G dominant 7th chord. There's just one additional note in this case, A flat, and that one is equivalent to the flat 9 interval. So it sounds like a G dominant 7 flat 9 chord, but you don't have to remember that if you don't want to. You can just remember that you can replace a dominant 7th chord with a diminished 7th chord that is a major third up from the root. So instead of G dominant 7th, I'm playing a B diminished 7th chord. So my friends, I know that this was a lot of information in just one video. That's the exact reason why I took some extra time to make a really cool cheat sheet for you with all of this stuff. It would be great if you could download all of the files I made for you. I spent quite some time on them. That way you can either print them out or you can just open them and use them when you're writing your songs. You might have heard it, even with the more easy chord substitutions, that makes a huge difference right away. And I think it will really improve your songs, but also your improvisation or even your sweep picking sections, for example, when you think in arpeggios this way. Alright my friend, you made it all the way until the end of this course. I'm very proud of you. Don't forget that this is all just a preview of what awaits you inside my online guitar academy on patreon.com/burn. You get access to 12 premium guitar technique courses, 5 really awesome music theory courses, 4 home recording courses, and of course there's also a personal coaching tier in case you feel a bit stuck right now and want my personal input and feedback. As mentioned, there are only limited slots this month because the demand is crazy high. Just click the link down below and see if there's still a space for you. I'm waiting for you inside my online guitar academy. Have an amazing day. Greetings from Vienna and bye bye.